Battlefield 2042 just received Update 5.2, and within Update 5.2 was the long-awaited Hourglass Rework, which was leaked and teased and trailer-fied and all sorts of things, and we finally get to see if DICE managed to save the worst map I have ever played in any FPS game in my entire life. And that opinion is held by a lot of people. Some people would say that Hourglass is by far one of the worst Battlefield maps ever made. Some people would extend that to one of the worst FPS maps ever made. And I'm just interested to see, in this comparison video, whether or not DICE managed to pull it back. And my thoughts might be interesting to some of you because, let's just say it's better than I thought it would be. So without further ado, let's start going over the layouts first, and then I'll walk you through some of the points of the map, and then I'll give my final thoughts. So if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and let's start taking a look at things more closely. Alright, so I feel like a fair starting point with the Hourglass layouts we're going to go over is the previous iteration of the 128-player Hourglass Rework, and everybody is complaining that, oh my god, they removed the stadium, and so we'll just take a look at this here. As you can see, far left of your screen, there's the stadium everyone's complaining about that they removed. Some people just say, hey, just move it in the center of the map. I don't think that would necessarily work, and here's why. You can't just take a giant stadium that they buried in the sand and plop it in the middle of the map and have it flow and make sense and look good. That would not satisfy any of the map designers, and I'm sure it would not actually play that well gameplay-wise either. But as you can see, this is the previous iteration of the 128-player Conquest layout, and it is beyond gigantic. We're talking about some areas, particularly between E3 and D1, C1 and C2. We're talking 300, 400, 500 meter swaths of open desert. And when I was gathering the information for this video, I was thinking to myself, okay, well, let's take a look at the new 128-player layout. And no matter where I looked, I could not find a server that was hosting Hourglass with the actual 128-player layout, if it actually exists. So unfortunately, this is the only iteration of the 128-player layout we have to go over today. Maybe I just got unlucky, maybe I didn't look in the right places, but I looked for about 15 minutes and I could not find it. Now, moving on to something a little more familiar, the previous iteration of the Hourglass 64-player Conquest layout. Now, this layout looks drastically different to the new Hourglass Conquest layout, which we'll be taking a look at directly after this. Let's just take little notes of something, right? So you got, okay, the deployments are on opposite ends of each other. There's only one deployment. C1 and A1 are very far apart, probably 300 plus meters away. Same thing with A1 and B3. And generally, the map still suffers from that weird emptiness that is between A1 and B3 and C1 and B3. There's essentially nothing going on there. I mean, look at it. It's sand. You could call this sand map, and people would know exactly what you're talking about. Now, let's jump over to the new Hourglass Conquest 64-player layout, and you can see that it is drastically different. First of all, there are two separate deployments for each team. If you look at the top or bottom corners of either team, you will see these two separate deployments, and in general, the layout is much more linear. There's going to be a better flow between B1, C1, D1, F1, and then through F1 to E1 and G1, and then A1 is just kind of, you know, your gimme flag mirroring Russia's gimme flag, which is E1. However, if you take a look between the points of A1 and G1, you will find a potentially even larger open swath of desert. I would wager a guess that that's probably about 500 or 600 meters of open desert nothingness. Aside from the fact that the layout is much better in my opinion, there just really isn't much they could do with this map, is there? Like, maybe you could put another flag in between A1 and G1, but they didn't, so what are you going to do? And I believe this is the area where people were saying, oh, just move the stadium in between A1 and G1. I understand what people want there, but it would just look stupid, wouldn't it? Plus, you have to understand what you're actually talking about. If they were to move the stadium in between A1 and G1, they would have to make it look like it belongs there. They would most likely have to move other points and terrain and different orientations. It would essentially change the entire map. So I definitely understand why they omitted the stadium. Now we're going to jump over to the previous iteration of Hourglass Breakthrough, and I am much more familiar with Hourglass Breakthrough because I typically play Breakthrough in Battlefield 2042, so I have played this more times than I would like to admit. The people that have played Hourglass Breakthrough will know that it wasn't exactly the most cover-heavy area, okay? And that could be said for the entire map of Hourglass, but particularly the first sector, the second sector. Those two sectors right there are incredibly annoying and famous for being the biggest railgun farm in the entire game, which speaks to the amount of, or lack thereof, of cover. Generally speaking, when I go over to the new Hourglass layout, it's going to have the same sort of shape, but the sectors are not only reworked in the way that the terrain is, but they sort of got rid of a lot of this area. Jumping over to the new Hourglass layout, you can see a big difference. So first of all, A1 is now a single point, whereas the previous one was a double point. It's moved up farther at the beginning of that little town rather than all the way back there. And then if you take a look at where the arches are, that is a 2-point sector, and 1 point is below in the tunnel, and the other point is kind of in this big crater area. And that area in general, I would say, is much improved. And then if you take a look at the third sector, that area is also much improved in my opinion. If you remember, that used to be this sort of weird skyscraper area where you can kind of see the skyscraper I'm talking about. I'll zoom in the post edit here. But if you remember, you would have to run past this giant skyscraper and people sit on the tops of these little edges here, and there's just no cover. There's just a big hill, and it was just awful in general. So that third sector is completely different. Then the fourth sector is essentially a combination of the old third sector and the old fourth sector, and that also plays better in my opinion. Now, I'm not glazing Hourglass Rework here, okay? It is much improved in my opinion, but there's only so much they can do with Hourglass, okay? And I do have to say, I am impressed with how much they actually did manage to make Hourglass a decent-ish map. Now, I don't say that without complaints, obviously. And now I'm going to jump in game and show you where those complaints lie and where some of the criticism points lie for me. Now, as far as the first sector goes, I don't really have that many complaints as far as the actual layout of it. I think it's largely okay. I do have to mention that there are a ton of head glitches here. Like, we're talking, all this is a head glitch, all this is a head glitch, that's a head glitch, that's a head glitch, that's a head glitch, this is a head glitch here, right? Like, every fucking thing about this is a head glitch. So that's really all I have to say for the first sector. And let me just, destroy these bots for a second so we can actually take a look at the second sector. Now, one of my main complaints about the second sector is the approach to the second sector. This is brutal because, again, you have the same problem where there are just a ton of head glitches here. And you can mitigate them with smoke grenades, but this is the real problem with the second sector, in my opinion, is this approach. So if you want to peek anything here, you're talking, 1 smoke grenade, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 over there. So, I mean, you can't even do that most of the time without the teammates. And God knows the teammates aren't going to help you. And this hill here is typically, this is a bot lobby just because I'm showing you, but this here typically is unbelievably contested. You'll have people that are all the way over there, the people that are all the way over here, head glitching your approach. The tunnel gets very packed very quickly, and it's very difficult to get in. It reminds me of Metro trying to break in. It reminds me of Exposure last sector. C Point trying to break in. You get very crowded very quickly. So my advice, if you're on attack, you have to take the lower point fast, or else you're not going to get it. You're really not. I lost 2 games today playing this without being able to get the that sector there because my team just couldn't break through at all. In terms of the second point on this sector, well, excuse me, before we talk about the second point, the upper area here is largely the same, and that was kind of the problem. It was extremely complex, but that's the issue, right? Like, it's too wide to be this complex. So I would have loved to see them sort of shrink it, maybe pull it back, like put an out of bounds line that way, so you don't have to worry about that. Then maybe make the cover appear simpler, but still effective, if that's possible. And then in terms of the second point, I mean, the second point is just hell. Like, I'll try to show you. This is crazy hard to take because they have that high ground there. They have all the high ground over there, and they're head glitching you all the while from all of this over here. On top of the fact that they can shoot you from the skyscrapers there. There's also some weird people. So this is definitely a very difficult point to take. There's an underground route you can take, but again, that's going to be heavily contested. And if you're wondering why the recoil looks weird, it's broken in bot lobbies, if you didn't know that. They broke it. I don't know how they did that. But yeah, second point, very difficult to take here. I would say that it just sort of needs something to break up these long sight lines again. Again, you can do it with smoke grenades, but generally speaking, I mean, you're not going to smoke off everything that I'm looking at here, and it's just kind of a nightmare. What are you doing? Get away from me, okay? Dice, add an option to turn bots off. Add an option to turn bots off, please. All right, so now we're into the last sector, and I just want to show you guys this building that I zoomed in on earlier. This is the building that you would actually have to run past in the old iteration of this map. If you remember, you have to run all the way over here. Then the people would hug the sides of this building, and this was sort of more sloped downwards, and people would sit, you know, over there. So as you can see, the terrain here is drastically different. The approach is much better, and fuck this building in general. It's just stupid. Now, moving up, this building is actually not that much of a problem anymore at all. As I said in the previous segment, they combined this point and that point to form one sector. My only problem with that is D1 is largely the exact same, and I'll show you that right now. They really didn't make any changes to this that I can see that are meaningful in terms of the way it actually plays. If these degenerate fucking AI would stop shooting at me. But as you can see, this building is essentially the same. This point layout, as far as I can tell, has seen some minor cover added in the center areas that you can, I guess, prone and use. But in general, this flag is the exact same. And the distance between this flag and the other flag is, I mean, almost 200 meters. So that's a big run. This is going to be a sector that you're going to capture one flag, then you're going to lose that flag, and then you're going to have to go back and capture the other one. But when you go back to capture the other one, your fucking stupid team loses the other flag that you just captured. So you have to go back and run and back and forth. That's exactly what's going to happen in this sector. And D2, it's actually, it's a much different location for the point. If you remember, D2, I think, was more centered in this area on the last breakthrough, around the big soccer ball or golf ball, whatever you want to call it. This is sort of smack dab right in between these two skyscrapers here. I don't like this point at all. So in general, this is probably my least favorite sector out of the entire Hourglass rework. But I do think it is probably still better than the old Hourglass. So just to wrap this video up, I think the Hourglass rework is better than I anticipated. The map is still rough, obviously, because it's Hourglass and they didn't really give themselves much to work with. But I think with what they had to work with and the layouts they had previously, it is a pretty big improvement, and I feel that in my gameplay and just my general enjoyability while playing the game. I don't nearly want to leave the server as much as I did in the old Hourglass, and actually haven't while playing it, and not nearly as much. So if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what you think about this video format. Obviously, I'm a bit late to this video format because this is the last rework we're going to receive of any of the base game maps in 2042, but I figured maybe I'd do this for any of the new maps being added to the game, or well, new maps, new map being added to the game if they are going to do that for season 6. Let me know what you think about the format. Definitely comment down below if you enjoyed the video and just the overview. Comment your thoughts as well. I'd like to hear from you guys, and yeah, go in the Discord, follow me on Twitter, follow my Twitch channel, link is in the description, and I will see you guys later. Thank you for watching.